welcome back. Today we're going to talk about text types, and we're going to only talk about two particular text types today. There's lots of different ones, particularly under prose, but I'm going to divide up text into two types, prose and poetry. And the reason I'm doing that is because in Year 8 you're going to be doing poetry this term, and I want to talk to you about the difference between prose and poetry. Basically, there are two ways you can write, and they are in prose or they are in poetry. Prose means that you're using all the rules of grammar that I've been teaching you. You're writing in sentences, you're punctuating your sentences correctly, you're following the grammar rules that I've been teaching you. And there's set rules, and you can't change them. You have to follow them. Otherwise, you'll have all red marks around your work and you'll be told to fix it up because you haven't followed the rules. Now, with poetry, maybe this is why lots of young people like to write poetry, there are no rules. You don't have to have sentences if you don't want. You can, but you don't have to. You don't have to have punctuation or follow punctuation rules. And you don't have to follow the rules of grammar. So it's a very free-flowing form of writing. And you'll find in these poems here examples of how these particular things have not been followed. There's no sentences, there's no punctuation, the grammar rules are not there. Usually that they haven't written in sentences, because the big difference between prose and poetry is this word, sentences. These can be just words, fragments of sentences and so forth. For example, this is a poem. I've written this poem. Anybody can write a poem. And it says, bird fly sky high. That's my poem. I haven't given a title, but I might call it bird or flying or something like that. Now you can see how I've breached all of these things that we do in prose. The first word of a sentence or the start of something should have a capital. I haven't got it. It hasn't got a sentence, it hasn't got a verb, a subject and object. Fly, I suppose you could say, is a verb. You might ask, what's flying? The bird is flying. Flying where? In the sky, and it's flying high. But it's got a lot of the connecting words like articles and prepositions missing. Fly, sky, high. No full stop at the end. Don't have to do that. Don't have to have commas. Nothing. But that's my expression, that's my poetic expression of how I'm feeling about the sky and the birds and flying and so forth. If I was to write this in prose, I would write something like, the bird is flying high in the sky. And I'd have to put in all those pronouns, prepositions and articles to make it make sense on its own. But do I have to do that for poetry? No. The other big difference, and you'll learn from your teachers as you go through this book, is that both prose and poetry make use of figurative language, but poetry in particular relies on it heavily. And figurative language includes things like similes, metaphors, alliteration, onomatopoeia, assonance, rhythm, rhyme, and so forth. So you will learn in these poems about figurative language, and I'll do a session for you on figurative language, so you can read the poems and identify the use of those particular writing techniques. You can use them in prose, but not as much as you would use in poetry. So that's our basic introduction to this term. The fact that you're doing Indigenous poetry. Poetry is different from prose. All the rules I teach you for prose relate to all of the responses that you write. Essays, assignments and so forth, that's prose. If you want to be creative on the weekend and write a poem or some song lyrics, that's also poetry. You don't have to follow all those rules and regulations. Thank you again for listening.